Welcome to Fintech Uncut, the quiz show with candid commentary on the biggest fintech and financial services news of the week that was. Disclaimer: this show is created purely for entertainment purposes and contains segments of sarcasm, satire, parody, and humor, even if you don't think any of it is funny. The creators do not accept any responsibility or liability for the accuracy of any content shared and reminded you to always fact-check everything yourself. And now, it's over to your quiz master.
Welcome everyone at Fintech Uncut, the quiz show with candid commentary on the week's biggest fintech and financial services stories with the wise guy, the other guy. And for the first time here in our virtual studio by Judge Barb. Welcome, Barb.
Thanks, everyone.
My name is Rick, your host for the day, eager to know who will win this week's quiz, and more importantly, to learn a lot more novelties about the wonderful world of finance. And let me start with the very first question. That's quite a tough question, in fact. Did you know that number 46 is the number of samurai out of 47 who carried out the attack in the historical Ako Vendetta, sometimes referred to as the 46 Ronins, to discount the one samurai forced to turn back? Talking about discounts, what else does 46 stand for since this week?
Getting in there early, Chris, because I know the answer to this one. SpaceX launched 46 Starlink satellites this week, which will give you a discount on your broadband. There we go. I got the 46 and the discount all in one answer. And I got our mandatory Musk mention in the first answer of the quiz.
I actually thought it was the Belgian equivalent of the number that we call 69.
Oh.
No? Talking of samurai, did you know that there's actually a Japanese venture capital firm called Samurai Incubate? And they were founded 15 years ago and have actually incubated over 130 startups worldwide, including more than 30 in Africa. So watch out for the samurais.
Were any of them fintechs, by the way?
Many of them are fintechs.
Interesting.
I can't name them offhand because I need to research further, but suffice to say, any VC firm that's incubating must be dropping an egg somewhere.
I think that Rick's actually got the number wrong. Rick, are you sure it wasn't 42? Because we all know that's the answer to life, the universe, and everything. You know, anybody who doesn't know that 42 is the answer.
The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is like 40 years ago. I mean, have we not got a more recent example?
No, that still remains the answer to the life, the universe, and everything.
Oh, okay.
Minus points for Andrew for doubting the host.
Can I redeem myself then? Is it something to do with a massive, massive unicorn deflation? Potentially. Maybe.
Closer.
Like a 46% reduction in value of our favorite unicorn that we keep on talking about, Revolut.
Tell me more.
Yes, Revolut has just been valued at 46% down by asset manager Schroders. And they're saying that Revolut is only worth about 5.4 million, which is a huge and massive fall from grace.
Now, what I wondered when reading that article, and perhaps Chris can answer that, the valuation of Schroeder, does it also effectively reflect Revolut's value? Is it just their estimation of what they have in stock?
Sorry, and that was only the 5.4 million was only their holding. That was down from 10 million. It wasn't the whole value of Revolut, because Revolut is, of course, a unicorn.
Yeah, it's still a unicorn. So it's just really Schroders, who were the majority stakeholder in Revolut, saying, okay, we're going to de-risk this because valuations have gone down so much. In fact, Revolut's worth 33 billion, and it's now being reduced to 15 billion. So that's the area where you can say they're a unicorn. Still a unicorn, but half the value they were over a year ago. But this is not unusual. I mean, Stripe's valuation has gone down 50% in the last year and a half. They were 95 billion, they're now 50 billion. Klarna's value dropped 85%. to 6.7 billion last year. Maybe
of course, they're not making a profit, do they?
Well, not at the moment, but that's the whole point of being a tech startup, that you don't make profits. Like German N26 has seen their key investors slash their investment by 2/3, selling its stake. And N26 is famously the bank that said profit is not one of our metrics.
Well, they said a few years ago, of course.
I still think they believe it, but I don't.
And of course, Revolut are still waiting for their banking license and are still got a couple of dark clouds hanging over their head. So I would say Schroders is possibly being cautious, and maybe these unicorn valuations are coming down to less stratospheric levels and more realistic.
Yeah, but if we're saying that, the valuations were twice or 3 times or even more the value they should have been, why were they valued that high in the first place? And the answer was riding on the crest of a fintech wave, but boom. And we're in a bit of a bust, but some companies will come out of it much stronger. We saw this with the internet, and I often refer to the Time magazine that had a headline, "Is Amazon dead?" But, well, they definitely weren't, and they're going strong.
Yeah, I mean, stock value is always based on future estimations, and the moment the market changes, those estimations change with it.
Well, maybe instead of Schroders, we should have Schrodinger's fintech unicorn valuations, because then whether you look at it or not, you're never sure whether it really is.
Extra
bonus points for Barb.
Bob, absolutely. Bonus points for Bob. She brings the funnies.
So we're doing points and loonies today, which I'm sorry to tell our participants are valued at about 73% of the good old American Mary points. Bonus points to Andrew for alliteration, and our typical Musk references, minus points though for insulting our fair judge. Or sorry, I'm the judge. What are you, Rick?
Quizmaster.
I guess since Chris is getting 21 points for keeping it mature, he wins this round.
I must admit, there's a program I'm watching on TV at the moment, Bob, which is Race the World. And it's a group of people who have to go from Vancouver to the other side of Canada, spending on foot the budget that they would have had for airfare. And so far, they've taken about 35 days to get 2/3 across Canada. And they're visiting all sorts of places like Manitoba Island and such like. But the reason I mentioned it is in the middle of the program, they said, "Oh, you have to have some loonies." And I thought, does that mean you need to have some unusually weird people around you? But then I realized that's the currency.
Well, they should have brought all of us, apparently.
All right, question 2. We all know there's one ring to rule them all. But do you know that there is something similar in the world of fintech? You don't, Andrew? Maybe Chris does.
Okay, I'll take this first. It's called open banking, isn't it? But actually, the open banking is an ecosystem. It has many rings, and that's what you find when that's what you find if you look at payment rings, because there's an awful lot of actual rings you can wear on your fingers that are contactless payments. And the UK has a version, but then most countries have a version. There's a K ring from Mastercard and a clear smart ring. Pay with ring in India. There's another Indian one from Kisht. Tapster, Jackcom, the list goes on. There's even a nice one from Glimera called Smart Queen. It's very pretty, and that's the one that I might use myself the most. But it does mean there isn't one ring that can rule them all. So I don't know where you got that from.
And I had one of those K rings, by the way, which unfortunately K ring closed down last year. They had a bit of a dispute with their processor, and which is why I'm not wearing the ring anymore. It used to be my party piece at conferences. I loved my payment ring.
I remember you had that.
Absolutely loved it. Yeah, it was the most convenient payment device that I've ever had. Didn't require charging, completely robust, and so didn't have to pick up a £1,000 device to do face.
After a while, Andrew, I always saw you talking about it. I never saw you using it. So I just thought it was a conversation starter for you.
No, I used to use it all the time. It was my most used card in my wallet. And by the way, Chris, the Pay with the Ring Indian fintech doesn't actually use rings. Their Pay with the Ring has not got a ring. It's only an app. But you do use Aadhaar ID to be able to get on there. So
you're going to work out how you define a ring, like sort of
But that's not the question. It's not about rings. It's about something else to rule the world.
Well, then you shouldn't have said one ring to rule them all. Are we talking about that CBDC of CBDCs that we talked about last week? There was that one CBDC to be the central bank digital currency of central bank digital currencies?
Well, no, because that was from last week.
Ah, but it's a similar kind of a concept, right? One payment thing for...
Yeah.
The only big news this week that might relate to it is the European Payments Initiative has gone on an acquisition trail to try and become a European Payments Initiative.
Yep.
And in fact, what I found interesting about this is they've acquired iDEAL and PQI, I think it is, in the Netherlands. And I was trying to persuade a company in Poland called Blick that they should go European and start lobbying the European Parliament to give them some more traction, and they've completely missed the boat. This is an interesting deal with iDEAL, in my view, because it does say that there might eventually be a European version of Mastercard and Visa, which is what the ambition is to be. But suffice to say, do we really need another third card initiative, Andrew?
I still don't know what to think about it, and I'm really looking forward to hear on May 16 what our panel on the sovereignty of Europe at the Banking Scene Conference is going to say about that, where we bring together someone from the European Commission, from the merchants, and from the acquirers, because I don't really know whether having these different brands under one EPI is so much different compared to, for example, making sure that it's interoperable. Like right now, they have iDEAL, they have Bank Contact Payconic, they have these things, but it's still just focusing on Benelux. How European is that? They're going to need a lot more before being a real...
Well, I mean, when EPI first started out, which is when I think it was still called Pepsi before it became EPI as well, there were 31 banks that had signed up, and within a short space of time, 20 of them pulled back out again. As a matter of fact, on the Finextra website, when you read the article announcing EPI's acquisition of Payconic and iDEAL, a suggested article directly beneath that article is exactly 1 year ago, where it says EPI decides to pull out of their competitive Visa Mastercard scheme. So, within 12 months, they've sort of done a complete 180 again. And it's just like, yeah.
It's not a 180, Andrew. Their focus right now is mobile, and they will not go for cards. That's correct. So it will be mobile in that respect, not a competitor, not a direct competitor with debit cards, but it's a competitor with debit schemes.
Yeah. And as Chris said, do we really need a third scheme?
Well, the good news is that if, like Britain, you're allergic to everything European, you can get an EpiPen.
I do think, Andrew, and I'm commenting way too much as being the host, but I do think if you read all the articles about cases against MasterCard, cases against Visa on abusing their monopolistic or duopolistic position, I do think there is a space for EPI to counter that. The European alternative for the American big brands.
So interestingly, the interchange on debit cards in Europe is only about 0.2%, as opposed to 1.15 and upwards in the rest of the world. So the European Union has already put a massive squeeze on those schemes. And when those schemes started, they were actually started before they became listed on the stock exchanges and limited liability companies and that kind of thing. They were actually both started as collaborations, consortiums by the banks, in exactly the same way as EPI is now.
It's very true. It's very true on paper, but there are many other alternatives to influence the market with marketing budget, consultancy budgets, and many, many other jars of money that these big companies have to play out against each other. But Barb, shall we look at points?
So Chris gets 5 points for being right. Rick, you get 5 points for unironically mentioning Benelux, and Andrew gets 0.2 points for his data contribution.
All right, the next one is quite a tough one for the host. Question goes, life can be so easy. Daft Punk told us a long time ago. Buy it, use it, break it, fix it, trash it, change it, mail, upgrade it, charge it, point it, zoom it, press it, snap it, work it, quick erase it, write it, cut it, paste it, save it, load it, check it, quick rewrite it, plug it, play it, burn it, rip it. Technologic. What am I referring to in the world of finance?
I'm going to take this just to say, do you have to, Rick? Every week. At least you didn't sing that one, you just read it. So, you know, I thought you were going to sing I'm Up All Night to Get Lucky, but you can't do that with your wife in the house.
There's this lady on the internet who always asks me to sing.
Well, I must admit, sort of, with our resident DJ here, Barb, I'm sure that she'll come up with some better versions of the songs to choose for this particular question, because I kind of don't know where it's going. It's something obviously related to fintech.
It has to do with the fact that using external software can be so darn easy.
Well, interestingly enough, when you said daft, there was an opinion piece published this week entitled "Stupid Bankers Making Stupid Choices Result in Stupid Things." And one of the stats within that article said 563 American banks have failed since 2001. Interesting data point that. I don't know how that compares to other places in the world. It's an isolated stat by itself, but I just thought, 563 American. So yeah, some daft bankers out there, maybe.
Well,
maybe they failed because they.
It's also interesting that a lot of those are very small bank failures, particularly after the 2008 crisis in the US domestic markets. And bear in mind that the US has thousands of banks. What's interesting right now for me is that everyone said, oh, let's copy the Canadian model of banking because that's safe as houses. And yet, as Barb can inform us, there's been a few sort of slips on the path in Canada in recent weeks where the Canadian banking model isn't as stable as we thought. Barb?
Yeah, it's fair to say that the regulators are certainly taking a look at the mortgage market, and was recently talked about that RBC is, I think, the biggest greenwasher that might be out there. So stability is one thing, but when you have an oligopoly that's ruled by six, where 93% of the Canadian market parks their assets, it's definitely not loyalty. It's that you have really no other better choices, or you feel like you don't.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting at the moment that after Silicon Valley Bank, Signature Bank, and Credit Suisse, and there's been wobbles with Deutsche Bank and others, that we're in some say another banking crisis, but we're in what I call a fintech bloodbath, a crypto winter, and a banking crisis. And I've never seen such jittery markets. We've already referred to the devaluation of some of the biggest unicorns in fintech. Crypto's down 80% over the last year or more, depending on which crypto you look at. And the banking markets seem to be completely wobbling at the edges, and some of them at the core. So maybe that's what you're referring to, Rick, that we've broken all the tech in the financial system.
Well, I was going to say, when Rick was singing buy it, use it, break it, fix it, trash it, I thought that he was reading off a PowerPoint referring to technical debt in any of the banks that I've been in recently talking to. And maybe as part of that, as actually driving the sentiment behind a report that says that globally, over half of the banks actually don't want to develop their own fintech. They actually want to plug into fintech platforms to be able to expand themselves, with only 6% of banks globally saying that they actually want to build fintech solutions in-house. And when you look at Europe, that same report says 73% of the European financial services institutions want to connect to fintech platforms, and only 5% want to build them themselves. And that was based on some global research of over more than 700 banks, which at the end of the day is incredibly good news for fintechs, because It just means that there still is a market opportunity for fintechs with a clear exit strategy or a clear growth strategy, because the banks are very risk averse to do this experimentation themselves. And if it means that you can come up with a good idea, you can get, there's some silly VC money still going around. The VCs are all gamblers. They're going to slap down funds only expecting 1 out of every 10 to actually get anywhere, which is way more loose and liquid with money than any of the big banks have to be. So all the experimentation can be done outside, and then when there's something worthwhile, the bank can just go, yeah, we'll plug in. So good news for fintech all round, I think.
Points for Andrew, Par?
Definitely points for winning. I think that deserves
Thoughts all the time.
8 points for sure. But I will give Chris 13 points for mentioning Canada, and that's one in honor of all the provinces and territories.
Chris knows how to suck up to the judges.
Tell me.
So unfair. Remember, Andrew, what we had was him who used rational rules.
That was very interesting.
Anyway,
I'm going to nail this next one, though. I've definitely got the right answer for this one.
If it's not me, I mean, I'm giving a lot of hints for Barb's fintech, fintech's playlist, and here come 2 more. Did you know that one of Warren G's most well-known productions is Regulate, featuring himself and Nate Dogg? However, did you know that it takes a majority of its structure Did you know that they took the majority of its structure from a track by Michael McDonald called I Keep Forgetting? You should be very happy, Chris, that I'm not singing this one. Another note, the question: what else is there to regulate quickly in fintech according to Global Fintech Powerhouse? It's not about Warren G, it's not about Nate Dogg, it's about regulation.
Yes, and I think that AI needs to be regulated. And did I mention before that I am moderating a panel on AI and ethics in the Banking Scene Brussels event on the 16th of May? So if you want to know why AI should be regulated, then come along to the Banking Scene on the 16th of May in Brussels, the best and biggest financial services event in the whole of the Benelux region.
Yeah.
Conference rings a bell.
Did you know that Nate Dogg was Snoop Dogg's cousin? And Snoop Dogg's got an investment firm called Casa Verde, which has invested in many fintech firms, most notably in Klarna. Although we may have regrets about that today. As I mentioned earlier, Klarna's valuation last year was down 85%. So I'm not sure how he's doing.
Well, if he still remembers.
Well, I just find it interesting that Nate Dogg, Snoop Dogg. How many other dogs are there out there?
There's a whole
bulldog, French bulldog, English bulldog. You have the American bulldog.
I've got a Labrador, a golden.
But I think that scammers should be regulated. Actually, there was a great article this week. Well, I say great article. It wasn't a great article at all, but an interesting article about there's a financial services well-known name in the UK called Martin Lewis. He's Martin Lewis Money Saver. Everybody trusts him. Everybody loves the guy for his advice and everything like this. And a scammer had actually placed adverts, I think, on Facebook, social media, claiming to be backed by and supported, endorsed by Martin Lewis. And a couple had gone to the press saying, describing how this guy had scammed them out of £80,000, basically their life savings, an elderly couple. But an interesting point that I saw in there was he advised them specifically to use Revolut to be able to transfer the money so that it wouldn't trigger any large transaction warnings from their own bank. Interesting, because we've just been talking about Revolut earlier on there. So,
how does this relate to the question, Andrew?
Well, because you said regulate. I think scammers should be regulated around, this kind of a thing. And it was also that they were, the guy was telling them to invest in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, which I know Chris is a big fan of.
Well, I'm not necessarily a big fan, but I'm a big fan of tracking it as a innovative idea, and particularly as my next book is all about libertarian versus statist currencies, CBDCs versus cryptocurrencies and more. But I think this relates to the fact that it's a wild west out there, but as we saw with FTX, Terra Luna, even going back to Mt. Gox a decade ago, which is still unraveling and being sorted out, because I still am owed some money from that exchange, and it looks like I might get it this year. Fingers crossed. But I'm also a big fan of Coinbase. The main reason being that that's one of the few exchanges that does have regulatory licenses in the UK and USA. And they've been in a big fight this week. And basically, an example of how bad things are is I just found on Twitter that there's a Coinbase wallet Twitter account, which is called @Coinbase wallet. So you've got to be careful about the cons out there. Having said that, the Securities and Exchange Commission in the USA is saying Coinbase itself is trading securities, which Coinbase denies, because there's denying that the basis of cryptocurrencies are securities. They're not. So a huge discussion going on basically between the SEC's chair and Brian Armstrong, who founded Coinbase with others. And it'll be interesting to watch how it all falls out. There is a threat that Coinbase will withdraw their head office from the USA. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. For example, if they come to the UK, because the UK wants to make London a crypto capital of the world, well, how do you do that? You get the biggest exchange based in London.
It's these analysis why we call you the wise guy.
Will be interesting to yeah, not for investment advice though, please remember that, not for investment advice.
Well, money may go up as well as down, inside out, and being in Belgium, you just don't know.
Or with yours go down the toilet.
Well, for investment advice, I don't think we should listen to this podcast.
No.
Anyway,
excuse me, but I would invest in Canada if I was going to invest anywhere.
Oh, sucking up again. Look at that. You already had the points, Chris.
Yeah, you
you
had them.
already
And
share with Barb that you have a Labrador,
you,
which is, I think, a Canadian province.
it's half of a Canadian province, so that's at least half a point to Rick. Chris had the points, but they get reassigned to Andrew for way too much trying to grease the wheels with the judge, and so that's 80,000 Canadian pennies.
But it is your dog is a Labrador, isn't it, Chris?
A golden Labrador.
Yeah. Anyway,
I mean, surely my dog gets the point for being called Ziggy after Ziggy Stardust.
Fair enough.
But your dog isn't in the show.
No, I know, but it's funny because my father-in-law, who's Polish, calls him Siegfried. And I say, no, it's Ziggy, not Siegfried. But Ziggy translates to Siegfried in Eastern Europe, whatever.
Indeed, whatever. Question 5.
Respect, man, respect.
All right. Mark Zuckerberg may have silently given up on the metaverse, as he heard in previous shows. Up in the Uncut. But there's a new kid in town to promote Web 3.0, and it's not Elon Musk. Who am I talking about? It refers to another song, Barb.
Satoshi Nakamoto? Sam Bankman-Fried? Jeff Bezos? No?
Chris, come on. I'm really disappointed that you didn't know this one. It's Captain James T. Kirk, William Shatner. Did you not see the massive news that he's just dropped his Infinite Collections NFT collection yesterday? I mean, this is massive in the world of Web3, and a huge celebrity name like that. All the Trekkies out there, surprised you weren't all over that, investing in the NFTs. He's the big new kid in town promoting Web3.
Perhaps you can exchange it for a Bored Ape.
A Bored Ape. Well, yeah, one of Chris's t-shirts. Bored Ape t-shirt for an NFT from James T. Kirk. How's that?
This t-shirt.
Ah! Did that say the leg end?
In fact, when Elton John had his Candle in the Wind song, I always thought it said that Marilyn's just finished when the leg end finished. Anyway, that's a true story because that's the way it read in my lyrics. But I think this maybe is to do with Mark's sister. Is that getting closer?
Yeah.
Because Randy Zuckerberg, and I saw it on John Oliver's last week Tonight show, and he was
That was
doing
awesome.
Yeah, he did an amazing breakdown of what's going on with crypto right now. And it's very funny. At the same time, it's quite sad, to be honest. A mixture of both, because I've been watching Celsius and a lot of the other crypto company exchanges and firms going into meltdown. And you have to bear in mind, though, that this is not cryptocurrencies. This is firms. It's like when a bank goes under or an exchange goes down. It's nothing to do with the actual US dollar or euro. It's to do with the trading companies in that space, which is the problem. But he did pick up on a track which I missed in 2022 that Randy Zuckerberg released, which is a parody version of Adele's "Hello." And I
Do
just
you want me to sing it?
No.
Please no. Maybe Bob can sing it for us.
I was just
No, Rick made the offer, so he has first billing.
well,
I'm not going to sing it.
I can tell you the lyrics, which was "Hello, it starts with "Hello, my name is Randy. Do you want to learn how to trade cryptocurrency? We'll go over everything because you have money from various blockchains and want to trade them with me." And it's like, oh my God. And there's a scary video that goes with it. It's just awesome. I was going to say awful, but then I say awesome, or it's cringe. It's Marmite. You love or hate it.
Do we actually know the period between making the song and her brother deciding to stop investing in Meta?
Do you think there's a
Is
correlation
there a
there?
link there?
Maybe Mark woke up with this nightmare one day thinking that he saw Randy in the Metaverse singing an Adele song and then realized it was true.
Hearing the Adele song and thinking, oh no, this is going the wrong way. I'm going to stop investing in the Metaverse.
By the way, just as an aside note, Gartner have included Metaverse as number 9 on their top 10 technologies to invest in for 2023. Are you kidding me? How far behind are they? Or have they got an agenda to push there? Loads of consultants.
They definitely have an agenda, Andrew, because they also came out with a stat, which I just laughed at, saying something like 90% of all financial services will be done in the metaverse by 2026. It was something as ridiculous as that. And I'm going, what, in 3 years, you think we're all going to be in the metaverse banking? It's ludicrous.
Absolutely. They're smoking something there with old Elon Musk, I think.
You don't accept your employees to use Zoom. Why would you allow them to go in the Metaverse?
How much is Elon Musk paying us? Because that's the second time you mentioned it.
Told you we've got to get sponsored to stop mentioning him. But sorry, okay. That was a detraction. Yes, Randy was the answer.
Barb.
So that's definitely 2,026 points for Chris. But a bonus Canadian point for mentioning a beloved citizen. Maybe some of you don't know this, but Mr. William Shatner, aka James T Kirk.
We're deviating here. I'm going to go to the last question. Acceptance is the first step in finding the answer. Acceptance means acknowledging the truth that a problem exists. Acceptance of a problem should ignite a fire that demands action. Who is UK's most recent therapist preaching this, not understanding what it's like at the other side of the table?
Beat you. But I'm guessing that Andrew can expand on this, because I reckon it must be something to do with Visa and Mastercard, as they're the leading acceptance of cards worldwide, and they also provide the full network of issuers, acquirers, merchants, authentication, verification, you name it. So maybe it's going back to the EPI thing we talked about earlier. We don't really need a third acceptance scheme.
It's a WTF round, remember?
And I think also Rick said, who's the most recent UK therapist? And you may not know this, because a little known fact that today, the first UK's first robot back therapist was launched. And the robot back therapist certainly wouldn't know what the other side of the table is like, because they're a robot. So You know, how does a robot know what it feels like to have a sore back? But it's a true thing. It's a company called Backhug. There we go. You asked about, you know, UK therapists and what they're preaching and the other side of that. No, not.
Well, a total aside, but there was a very interesting video online this week that was viral of a Chinese lady beating up a robot. And basically, in China, apparently all the medical services now have no staff in front of house, but you speak to a robot, and she couldn't get the appointment she wanted when she wanted. So she grabbed the cleaning broom and beat the robot to death. And I think she then got taken to a facility where she's being resculpted and
So
trained.
robots can die, according to you. They don't just go offline, they die.
Robots never die, they just go to circuits.
Yeah, you said
Beat to death.
beat to death.
Beat to off position. Yeah.
Well, no, it's not the answer, unfortunately.
I think
there must be a song called Beat to Death somewhere.
I think we're getting very far away from the empathy needed to potentially answer this question.
well, you know, accepting and acknowledging the truth was something that came up in another article by Jemima Kelly, a journalist at the FT, who was saying that people should accept and acknowledge the truth that using crypto for criminal purposes isn't a bug, it's a feature of cryptocurrency. It's actually by design that cryptocurrencies bypass regulation and are anonymous. So therefore it's not a bug. That's how they're designed, and apparently last year was the biggest year so far on record that they could actually record, that over $20 billion worth of crypto was used for criminal purposes last year.
Yeah, and that's a load of claptrap. And I've done a breakdown of this, which will be on my blog on Monday, but basically she fails to mention that it's just 0.24% of all crypto worldwide. That's $20 billion worth of current capital, and all the positive things that the report said about cryptocurrencies. And yes, it's risen slightly, but it's not completely anonymous. There's only one that probably borders that line, maybe one or two, but they're not mainstream. So Bitcoin and Ethereum are not anonymous, and if you use it for money laundering, you'll get caught. And they have had many of through Interpol and Europol services, a takedown of many crypto scams and criminals. And if you compare it with the banking system is far more open to abuse because it's much bigger, which is why you have $2 trillion of money laundering going through the banking system compared to 20 billion of whatever it is in crypto. So it's complete baloney. And I think the answer to this one is probably more to do with, if we're looking at a UK therapist or UK leader, the Bank of England, which hit all the headlines in the UK saying, we've got to accept that we're all going to be poor. And people don't like to hear that when you're on £200,000 a year, or just under. And I've heard this before. There's been quite a few people in the financial industry who say you can live happily on 30, 40, 50,000 pounds a year or dollars. And they don't know what real life is like when if you walk outside and you've got to take a taxi. I had this the other day. I was in Chicago and I walked into Starbucks and I ordered a cappuccino and a sandwich, and they gave me the bill and it was like $24 or something. Yeah, I was like, what the heck? I said, take it back. I don't want it.
That's absolutely not. Well, the interesting thing is, did you catch the guy's name at all? Because there's a bit of an irony in there. It's a bitter pill for everybody to swallow. His name is Hugh Pill. Didn't you see that? So the Bank of England's top economist is called Hugh Pill. So there's been lots of puns in the headlines of.
In previous time, one of their chief guys was called Mr. Bean.
Mr. Bean.
Yeah, there was a Mr. Bean. He may have been a Mr. Bean counter, but his name was actually Mr. Bean.
Oh, but yeah, it was totally insensitive of him saying, there is a reluctance to accept that we're all worse off. Yeah, no shit, Sherlock. Bloody hell, and whose fault is that? Maybe if the damn central bank stopped putting up the damn interest rate all the time, it wouldn't push up everybody else's costs so much. But yeah, I'm not an economist, so I can't take that one.
We were spoiled the last few years, though.
I want to
Ask
be close
Chris.
to them.
He has known a different other periods as well in his life. I don't. I'm young, but anyway, Barb, we're running close to the end of the show, and before Chris comments on my comments, can you please share with everyone who scored the highest this question and then later in total?
So certainly I'm allocating 17 points out to the person that answered this question correctly. And it's multiplying it all by 0.73 to translate it back to Canadian exchange. It actually means that Rick is our winner for properly performing Daft Punk live on the air.
Excellent. And does that mean that I can go to Starbucks with my score?
I don't think you got that much money with your the Canadian exchange rate. You wouldn't be able to afford one of those Starbuckses with all that money.
All right, no, thank you very much. It's the first time that I win the 20th episode. Excellent.
It's a landmark.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank
That's
you
Canadian
very
for you.
much, Barb, for saving us, because we ran out of judge this week, and thanks to you, we still had a quiz and so on to deal with these guys. I'm very glad for the first time I won. Thank you all very much for listening and watching. I cannot wait for more international fintech news coming soon. If you like our show, make sure to register on our website for a newsletter to be the first to know about new episodes. As a big fan, we recommend you to have a look at our merchandise as well for t-shirts like the one that Andrew is wearing right now. This was the 20th episode of Fintech Uncut. We hope to entertain you, your colleagues, your friends, your connections and followers, cats, rabbits, dogs, and all very soon again. Bye-bye.